rules and regulations that had nothing to do with Scripture. And so this, of course, is the start of the fire. And the fire now gets warmer and warmer. And so the Holy Roman Emperor, whose name was Charles V. By the way, folks, read some history about Charles V. He, at this time, was just 19 years old, 19 going on 20. He was very, very young. Charles V is the guy that gave the boats to Magellan to circle around the world. Charles V is the one who benefited from the robbing of the Aztecs and the Incas. He was Spanish. His mother was Spanish. That's where he got the background. And so Charles V would become a very important figure in the Holy Roman Empire, but at this time, of course, he had just been in office for about a year. Well, he insisted, as he talked to, there we have the picture of Charles, and as he talked to Frederick III, called Frederick the Wise. And as you see Frederick the Wise, he was very wise, because as he asked to have an audience with his emperor, he turned to Charles V and he says, "Now, nephew," they were related. By the way, Charles V, man, I don't know if I need to share too much, I'm going to run out of time. Charles V, because of the inbreeding of kings and queens, had an extended jaw, an unnatural extended jaw that he could not even enjoy. He could not chew his food like you normally would, and he suffered in health all his life for that. You know, the person they chose, you know, it'd be pretty hard to choose an actor that would be dressed up that way. Anyway, so what did Frederick the Wise say? Frederick the Wise reminded Charles V of his grandfather Maximilian's promise that if a German was ever accused, that German needed to be tried in his own country. Charles V wanted to send Luther where? To Rome. But everybody knew and remembered when Huss was sent to Rome with a promise of a protection going and coming, Huss never left Rome. And this is what Frederick knew would happen to Luther. If he went to Rome, he would never return. And so he arranged for this special meeting called the Diet in the small town of Worms, which actually at the time wasn't in the German territory, but I like to be detailed later. Worms. All right. So he was sent to Worms. One of the things that happened in his travel to Worms, where was he having to leave? He had to leave Wittenberg and go all the way to Worms. You know how far that is? 325 miles. And in those days, how did you travel? Walking, and horseback, and cart. But as Luther traveled to Worms, all of Germany knew it, and in every village that Luther went through, crowds came out and cheered him and encouraged him to go. And when he came to Worms itself, here is a depiction on the screen of how the crowds cheered him and welcomed him to Worms, which that would have helped his courage, I think, a little bit, don't you think? And so here is a depiction of the Diet of Worms. Guess who's interviewing him? Johann Eck is interviewing him. And of course, this is before Charles. And if you notice in the picture, notice what's happened to Aleander by this time. Aleander has become a cardinal. Yeah, that changed. And if you know some history, that's quite important. What did Eck ask him? He showed him these writings, and what did he ask him? Two questions. Are these your writings? And the second question he asked him, do you recant? How did Luther respond? I need some time. I need some time to think about this. And so, Charles V gave him until the next day at 4 o'clock. And Luther that night, of course, went through his mental and spiritual preparation to answer those two questions. And so the next day, the same question was asked. Are these your books? How did he respond? Yes, but they're not all the same. There's three categories here. And he outlines the three categories. And he said, in the third category that I sent letters to individuals, maybe I was a little harsh, a little strong. But the first two categories, of course, he had written a title and called On the Babylonian Captivity. And of course, who did he compare Babylon to? You know, the church was captive